Hey guys and girls, back for another month of the monthly recap. So this video is going to be for August. So my guests today, substituting, so they're fresh off the bench, looking to make an impression, and that is the Horror Movie Tea podcast, Jess and Alyssa. Hey guys.
Hi.
Hey Keith, thanks for having us as always.
No problem. Sort of old hands at this by now, so we should have a smooth sort of podcast. Maybe
We'll see.
Yeah,
Maybe too
definitely.
much
I feel like
draft,
that's asking a little
but
much.
that's the aim. Smoothish. So you guys know the drill. This is when me and the guests talk about what we've been watching in the world of film and TV for the last month. We hopefully give you some recommendations, where they're streaming or if they're in cinemas or whatever the case may be, but also say what we think about them overall movies. And Alyssa, if you want to kick us off.
Oh, putting me in the hot seat.
Yeah. Well, you're in the middle, so it makes sense.
So one movie that me and Jess both saw, but separately, that I really enjoyed was Deadpool and Wolverine. I really liked that movie. The beginning though, with the whole what he did with Wolverine, I was a little bit shocked. I won't spoil it for anyone, but
I was dying.
it was just kind of like, whoa,
great.
They took it there. But no, besides that, like, I feel like Hugh Jackman and Ryan Reynolds had really good chemistry. And the movie was just like really fun overall. And I feel like, I still like the first one the best, but this one definitely kind of brought life back into the franchise a little bit, because the second one was the second one was good, but it just didn't quite hit the mark for me. So this one was kind of like going back to baseline in a way.
Yeah, I agree. The second one was good, but it just wasn't the same. The first one, they just knocked it out of the park, so it's kind of hard to follow that. But I did like this latest one better than the second one for sure.
Yeah, that seems to be what I've been hearing, really. And I know we probably shouldn't spoil them, but I know there's a whole host of cameos in this as well.
Oh yeah,
which is surprising.
Yes.
Tons.
So many.
Tons.
And were you
they
happy
budget
with
for this.
those? Yeah. Were you happy with those cameos? Yeah.
Mostly, there was
Most of
one
them.
character that I feel like they could have cast someone better for that role, but I know other people have liked him in that role, so it might just be my personal opinion, but
Yeah.
for the most part, it was great. I loved all of the different characters that they had in the movie.
I feel like
For the most part, I enjoyed their choices for casting. So.
Yeah, I feel like they almost throw a red herring for one of them, because you're like, oh, it's that guy. And then it ends up the kind of like twist who it actually is. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I know the one you're talking about.
Yep. Steven spoiled it for me, though.
Oh,
He's like, it's not who you think it is. I'm like, dude, shut up.
rude.
Rude. But yeah. But
Yeah.
I definitely recommend.
Oh yeah,
Okay.
it's tons of fun.
It seems like one of those movies where like you probably have to see it pretty fast, otherwise you're gonna have that stuff spoiled.
Oh yeah.
It's so hard nowadays with
Yeah.
social media and everything.
Mm-hmm.
So, well, I haven't seen it yet. I'm not a massive Deadpool fan, so it's the sort of thing I'm not going to be rushing to. But I've definitely heard a lot of good things about it, and I mean, I know they've promoted the hell out of it for months.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, the trailers have been in cinemas for months now, and it's obviously really paid off. And the box office and getting Hugh Jackman for it is such a big deal.
He had been working on him for a while.
Yeah, and I mean, it's always, of course, it's recorded video, so who knows what it's like off screen. But
Yeah.
at least the promotional videos, been seeming like they've gotten pretty close, and they did like a Hot Ones episode, and that was really fun to watch between the two.
Well, from what I hear, they're pretty buddy now.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I've
I
heard.
think Ryan Reynolds wore him down finally.
And I hear Ryan Reynolds has promised his wife no more, basically. Because there was a line from Blake Lively, wasn't there? Like, if he does Deadpool 4, I think we're getting a divorce or something. Pretty funny.
Speaking of his wife, while she was like traveling, Ryan Reynolds and Hugh Jackman recorded a video for her where Ryan Reynolds is like, "We miss you so much, me and the kids, we can't take it anymore." And then Hugh Jackman pops in and he's like, "Please, I can't take it anymore. I can't kiss him anymore." He's like, "I can't replace you." And it's just like, oh man, it's great.
The good old fashioned male bromance is still alive and kicking.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Well, so my first choice for the month is also another big cinema release, and it's been out for a couple of weeks or so. And that is the new Alien movie, Alien Romulus.
Ooh, I've been wanting to see that.
Okay, well, I'm planning a review of it, and because it's only been out a couple of weeks, it's probably not fair to spoil too much about it. So I'll just sum up some of my thoughts. It's directed by Freddy Alvarez, who did the Evil Dead remake / soft reboot. He also did Don't Breathe. So he's the director. Ridley Scott, I know, is a producer, and it seems like he gave some advice on it. I know one of the rumors is that he suggested sort of trimming 20-30 minutes, which apparently Alvarez agreed to. And I will say, having seen the film, I think that might have been wise. I think they maybe could have cut a bit more. Not that it's a long film, it's about 2 hours, but the end of the movie is so packed with things going on. I think maybe some of that stuff could have been cut out. But
It kind of messes with the pacing.
Yeah, I think so. So the setup is then it sort of dives into this idea of like the main company that we know from the Alien movies, where they're almost treating these like younger characters as like modern day slaves almost. And so you have a group of characters who go on a mission to try and like get an aircraft to like escape the sort of world that they're currently in. But they need this synthetic character who's one of the main characters, because they need him to operate the doors and open the doors on the spacecraft. And he has a bond with the main character of the movie, who is almost like the Ripley type character of this movie, but her parents adopted him because they like found him / it in like a dumpster like years ago. So it's almost like an adopted brother, and they have this sort of bond to them. So she's a little bit concerned about like taking him along, and she's been hesitant to kind of tell him like the harsh truth of that one day, maybe they'll have to separate. That's where you start getting the alien plots. And there's a lot of like nods and tie-ins to the various Alien movies we've had over the years, some very egregious, and it's not that great. It's a disappointment for me. It's
a lot.
Yeah.
Which is unfortunate. It looks promising.
It does look promising. I would say, I think for about an hour, I was quite into it because I was quite enjoying, like, then they had an idea to expand on that world and the universe, and I thought it was quite a decent idea. And I don't think the characters are great. That's one thing I will say. I think the lead two characters are the best characters and the most interesting. I think the lead character, the lead actress, does a really good job. And I think the synthetic life form is an interesting character as well. Some of the things they do with him about, you know, how he's programmed a certain way, but at some point he gets a different programming which complicates the mission and puts him at conflict with the human characters. So I think they're
in the first half.
Yeah, I think the relationship between those two and those two characters, I think they are the best characters in the movie. The other characters I didn't really like. They were hard to really get a handle on, and they were quite unlikable, but not in a very interesting way, just in a very kind of dull, one-note, douchey sort of way. And I wondered partly if it's a little bit of like Alvarez has done like movies like Evil Dead and Don't Breathe. And I think in those movies, the characters are quite blunt and harsh. And I think it works for those movies, but I'm not sure it works for an Alien movie where you probably want to be rooting for the characters, or at least if they are kind of annoying, you want them to be interesting to like watch. A little bit bland and one note. But it sort of gets up to about an hour where I think it's like decent at least, and I'm kind of into it. I'm into some of the visuals, some of the mood of it. But then it just slowly, like from there, gets progressively worse, really. And it's the stuff where they're starting to like dive too much into the nostalgia and some of the decisions they make. And I won't spoil it here, but it is really infuriating, really. Because I think when you do an Alien movie, and I think this is the biggest drawback of this movie, then it feels the need to exist and reference and refer back to certainly the first two Alien movies, the third one a bit, and then there's a little bit of Prometheus. Only slightly, because I think that's partly what this movie was trying to do, is maybe fix some of the problems of that. But
they have so many though.
Well, it's better than Prometheus, but that's not really saying much.
That's kind of a low bar there.
Yeah. I mean, Covering, I didn't actually mind as much as some people, so I would have to rewatch that. Like, I didn't hate that one as much as some people did. Tries like Alien, it's such a wide universe. Then I think you can do other things, and that's what the movie was trying to do in the first half. And then it just went for the safe, easy options. I mean, one moment I will mention, which isn't a massive spoiler, but they do have like their own version of the chest buster scene from the original, and the problem is, obviously that was so well done in that original movie. Like, first of all, the effect of it was so well done, but also it was just a great moment because you didn't see it coming. Like, when you're watching that movie first time around, you would have no idea that's about to happen. Mm-hmm. But this one is so signposted, you so see it coming a mile off, then that's what they're going to do. And it just gets more and more messy as the film goes on. Like, there's just all these decisions that are adding up, and there's a massive egregious one, which I won't spoil because it is quite massive. Spoilers. And the CGI for that stuff is pretty bad. I know people have been happy with the CGI. I like some of it. I don't like all of it. I think some of it does look a little bit ropey, for me at least. And yeah, it just piles up as you get more and more into the back half of this movie, and it just gets very silly. It does get silly with a lot of its decisions. So
I was going to ask, do they have any practical effects then, or is it all CG or a mixture?
I think it's a mixture. I think there is a lot of practical effects, which surprised me because I came out of it, because there's definitely some scenes I thought, well, that does look a bit like a ropey CGI effect. But apparently a lot of it was practical effect. And I think most people have liked the effects. I think that there are just some for me which I wasn't that keen on. And I mean, everyone agrees on the thing that I'm not going to say for spoilers thing, but the effect for that is so distracting, and that's a massive like nostalgia thing. And I guess I can spoil as well because it's not a big plot thing, but infuriatingly, they had to go with they have to recreate the aliens line with "Stay away from her, you bitch." They recreate it's like why, and it's made worse.
It's not the same when it's not.
You can't recreate the magic. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's made worse by the fact that the actor pauses before he says bitch. So it's almost like they're winking and nodding at the audience. If he just said it, it's like, okay. Yeah. No. So it's frustrating, and I think in the end it's just an okay movie. Like, I will rewatch it. Maybe it'll get better on a rewatch. It'll be interesting rewatching some of the older ones where I rank this one compared to some of them. Because one I haven't watched for a while, but one which I think is better than people give it credit for is Alien 3. I think Alien 3 is a really interesting movie where at least they tried to do something different. You know, I mean, not everything works in it, but I know the assembly cut is supposed to fix a lot of the issues with that. So I'm quite curious to see that version of Alien 3. But yeah, I mean, I would definitely have Alien 3 above this movie for sure.
I'm curious, which ending do you prefer on that one? When she's falling into the furnace thing, she has her arms out and she looks almost like in the shape of a cross.
Okay.
And that's it. And in a different ending, as she's falling, the queen is starting to emerge from her and she grabs it and holds it and falls.
Okay.
Yeah, so the same ending, but just like different stuff happens. And so it has like slightly different impact.
Yeah.
Okay. I guess I would have to watch it within context of the film, like, but it's yeah, maybe the first one without seeing them, maybe that's a bit better because you can just kind of see the metaphor without having to have this sort of add-on. But like I said, I know the assembly cut is meant to be pretty strong. Like, it does fix quite a lot of the problems, so I'm curious to see that.
I'll have to look that one up.
Yeah, but I do think Alien 3 is a bit underrated. I think it doesn't deserve the sort of hate it gets.
That I know we both watched separately, but we both still seem to enjoy was Twisters.
Okay.
Technically, that was a July movie for me. But no, Twisters was good. I really did. Yeah. I had low bar for that one and was pleasantly surprised.
Yeah. So I also watched the original Twister beforehand because it had been a good minute since I had seen it. And I don't think I ever actually saw it like the full way through. I had only seen like bits and pieces growing up. So sat down and actually watched the original Twister. And that one had me almost raging at the screen of that's not how this works. That's not how any of this works. And there were just so many issues with that movie. I ended up really enjoying Twisters a lot more.
Yeah.
It made a lot more sense. For the most part.
I feel like the characters in Twisters was actually a lot more they had more dimension to them.
Yes.
They weren't just like stereotypes or person A, person B. And you kind of actually they did a good job with like the chemistry between them too.
Definitely.
And actually as someone who has a fear of storms and knows way too much about the weather, they did a really good job. Like in the first Twister movie, they have pretty much the same type of like rope tornado. But with this one, they actually took the time to have the cloud structure, to have like wall clouds and have like correct wall cloud structure that indicates the storm has the potential of creating a tornado. They also have different types of tornadoes, like wedge tornadoes and all of that. And so I think they actually cared and took enough time to be like, these are the types of tornadoes. Now, of course, I'm thinking about one scene in particular, but there are technically multiple scenes where you're like, oh yeah, that's not realistic whatsoever. But at least they took like a lot more effort in making it seem realistic versus Twister. But I mean, honestly, Twister, just as a fun fact, no one really knew what storm chasing was until Twister came out. And that really catapulted that career, hobbyism, whatever you want to call it. And so since Twister, we have learned so much more about how tornadoes form. And so Twisters is kind of the result of that knowledge that we've gained. So, yeah.
Okay. Well, I do. I've not seen the new one, but I do. I've got to jump on something because, I mean, in the original, Bill Paxton and Helen Hunt have amazing chemistry. So I'm not sure I'm going to come away thinking the current one, the leads have more chemistry, because I think they have great chemistry in that.
So no, I agree with you. The main characters for the original Twister, the two main characters, they do have good chemistry. It's really the other characters, like I forgot what his name is, but he's super obnoxious and just like a bro, and it's just I can't stand those types of characters. So.
They don't have as good a group dynamic.
Yes. Yes. So it's like, to your point, the two main characters definitely have really good chemistry, but with I feel like with Twisters, they overall have the entirety of the group. I mean, there's a few characters I'm like, I could do without you, but for the most part, they make the characters a lot more likable.
Yeah.
It's more realistic because I don't know, just from what I'd heard, I just thought, it's just a big dumb, summer style blockbuster. And
I'm the type of person, I've had two people send me this TikTok that's like, tell me what this is, and it's a picture of a cloud, and I'm like, oh, it's a cumulus nimbus cloud, and they're like, if you said a cumulus nimbus cloud, you might have autism. If you just say cloud, you're neurotypical. Crap. So yeah, I was the right audience for the movie.
Yep.
Yeah, fair enough. And it sounds like maybe some of the information we've gotten about these things since has maybe helped this current movie, a bit more. I grew up with the original. I think there's a real charm to it. And I think the effects now, it's easy to sniff at them. But I think for the time they were pretty good, because it was mid-90s. And it's just it's fun
not bad for the time, for sure.
Popcorn movie with a bit of charm to it. And I think the leads are great. But I've heard solid things about the new one. So it sounds like it falls into the kind of better than expected type category.
Yeah, the only downside is it is kind of a cookie cutter, like copy paste of as far as like the actual storyline of them trying to get like more data about a tornado, and so that I'm like, okay, it's like they're just trying to improve upon the original concept, it seems. So like the actual story, I'm just like, I can take it or leave it.
Yeah.
But it's really like the characters and the time that they took on the actual like effects and tornado and stuff like that made me appreciate it a little bit more.
And another reboot, like they expanded upon the previous one.
Yes. Yeah.
So it wasn't just a complete cookie cutter, we're doing this but updating the effects kind of thing.
Yeah. Like they had another like a Dorothy 2 or whatever, where like or no, I don't think it's even Dorothy 2. Like I think it's like Dorothy 3 or 4 or something. Like
they had the original Dorothy, and they also had the new scan that they were using. They actually had 3 separate pieces, and they called them Lion, Scarecrow, and Tin Man.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they just completed the set.
Documentary I watched just the other night, and it's a documentary about Michael J. Fox. It's called still a Michael J. Fox movie. So this one is on Apple TV Plus. It came out a couple of years ago. I think it's based on the biography he did of his life, and obviously a big part of it is him learning to deal with Parkinson's and his day-to-day life, how it's impacted on his career and his life. We get some quite intimate shots of him and his family at home and how they've been affected. And I think it's a really good documentary. Like it just makes me have even more respect for Fox and what he's gone through, but also the way he's handled himself with so much dignity throughout. He's obviously done a lot of important work for Parkinson's. You know, he set up the foundation. I mean, that's raised over like $1 billion for that area. So that's really important stuff. And yeah, just how he's managed to keep his sort of sense of humor throughout and just really roll with it. And it's a different sort of documentary because it's not so much talking heads, like it is mostly from his perspective. And you get a lot of archive like interviews and things like that, but like a lot of it is him talking on camera and like recreating things. And they do a really good job with the archive footage, not just like pictures and stuff or interviews, but also the way they sort of quite smartly use clips from his movies and the TV shows he was on to kind of make it a bit more dramatic and visually engaging to watch. Easy life he lived, and like when his celebrity really hit so massive with. And he's another one, he's got this little bit of a rags to riches type story where like he was on the verge of maybe quitting acting, you know, before he got his massive break in like Family Ties. So it was pretty close to him deciding maybe it's not for him, maybe this isn't working out, I can't support myself with what I currently make. But it really shows you, one of the things that came across to me is almost that he was quite a reluctant celebrity, or that's the way it came across. I mean, when Back to the Future was such a massive like runaway hit, and I know then when he had Teen Wolf come out, you had like Back to the Future #1 at the box office, Teen Wolf #2, so his face was just everywhere. And it does come off, like he does come off as quite he's from a traditional background, he's very grounded, and how he was a little bit awkward, but he retains that sort of snappy sense of humor. Like that is him in interviews, but it's almost like that's to mask maybe the fact that he's not the most comfortable with his celebrity. But it really gets across how manic and crazy his life was at times, because some people know the story about how when they wanted him for Back to the Future, they wouldn't release him from his Family Ties contract. So they set up this arrangement where he literally got driven to the Family Ties set for the morning and he would do the film in there. And then he was driven to the Back to the Future set the same day and do some acting there for that movie. And then he got driven home, got about 3 hours sleep, and driver #1, as he says in the film, comes to get him. And it starts again. And that went on for like a few months. So it really, really shows that. It really shows, you know, how manic things were. But also, you know, the way he describes when, because it was like 1990 when he first had the first signs of like Parkinson's. And he just woke up one morning and it just sort of hits him. And he describes in quite intimate detail how something was off about his hands and how he could tell something wasn't quite right. And it was only over time, like they diagnosed it and he realized then that's what he's got. And it just sort of shows you the fact that he was a young man at that time. And he says in the documentary at one point, I don't know how a young man can have this like older person's disease. So it really shows that. But as I said, I mean, I think it really shows how great his family have been, you know, how tough this has been on him. His wife, particularly, who he met on Family Ties. And we get some stories about that. So there's some really great stories. And Yeah, it's a pretty candid documentary, but I think one of the things I sort of got from it was when you're someone who you're very charismatic, you're very funny, and you like to make people laugh, you like to have that sense of humor. It must be really hard then to have this condition when you can't do that. And that's one of the things he says in the documentary. He says, this is infecting my ability to speak in a very basic way, to like tell gags and just to. And you see him at home with his family. You can tell that he's very contented now. He's almost like adjusted to life. And he's accepted this is the way things are now, and he's just enjoying his life with his family. But I think it's a really great documentary, and I just have even more respect for him after seeing the documentary than I did before it. So that's really worth checking out. As I said, it's on Apple TV. So, and I know it's based on a book he did as well, so probably makes me want to read the book as well.
Yeah, gonna have to. You sold me on that one. I'm gonna have to look into that. That sounds really good.
Yeah, I really like that one.
Some rewatches this month. So one of them was the James Bond movie Tomorrow Never Dies, and because my husband's a huge James Bond fan, because he grew up with it, with his dad really liking James Bond. And one thing that he pointed out that I'm like, oh, I didn't really realize that, is like the girls in the beginning of the big song, those are the methods of torture that are used on him. I'm like, oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like, oh, that's dark.
But the opening title sequences are always a standout but they do such a great job with those opening titles.
I know, yeah. I mean, by far, still my favorite James Bond movie is Skyfall. Like, it's so powerful, and it's like they just kind of like went back to the basics in a lot of ways. But anyway, so for like Tomorrow Never Dies, though, it's a fun movie, and you have some really good Bond girls, and I feel like the action sequences are really fun, and having especially like the end scene have like the ice building melting and stuff like that, and so it's like a sense of danger of like the one of the agents going to like drown, and so he comes and rescues her, and so it's like that's really cool. So it's just like a really fun movie with lots of action. But I mean, there per James Bond quota, like there's some really cringe puns. Like I forgot which one it was, but there's
I
one
would be mad if there
husband,
wasn't, to be honest. But
where like me and my husband were like, really? Like, but yeah, that's always been the style. But yeah, fun movie.
Yeah, so I know you've got Terry Hatcher and Michelle Yeoh as the two main Bond girls, and I mean, yeah, come on, it doesn't get much better.
Yeah.
Pierce Brosnan pretty good as Bond. Crap theme though. That it's Sheryl Crow, one of the weaker Bond themes, I've got to say.
I thought it was wasn't it Madonna?
No, that's another. I think that's Die Another Day or something she did.
Or sorry, maybe okay. Then I did a mess up then. They have too many titles are the same.
So many.
It's it's the one where he gets captured and then tortured and then released, and then there's like the Halle Berry Bond girl that's like
that's Die Another Day.
Okay, Die Another Day. So sorry about that. So God. Die Another Day was the correct one.
I have nothing to add then, because that's one of the ones I haven't seen. I know it's the one with the invisible car, isn't it?
Yeah.
Fucking ridiculous by the sounds of it.
Yeah, that's when they start to have a lot more fun with it. Q and stuff.
I'll admit I've never seen a 007 movie.
Not one.
Oh,
Not one.
Oh!
They've never appealed to me ever.
They are pretty. They're definitely their own niche. But honestly, the
Mhm.
one with
Daniel
yeah,
Craig.
great. Yeah, you would probably like his Bond movies because they are less punny and less cringe. They're like they like
Bit more
made the tone
gritty,
a little.
aren't they? Yeah.
Yeah, they make it a little more serious and, as Keith said, witty. Like Skyfall is the one with Daniel Craig in it, and it's just such a good movie.
That's
But
a good
anyways,
one. That's very
and Casino Royale. Like, honestly, a lot of my favorite Bond films are ones that Daniel Craig has done. But to be
Mhm.
fair, the only other Bond films I had grew up with was the Pierce Brosnan ones, and
Yeah.
and all of the other ones I've seen before were like since I've been with my husband because he has all of them. So. But yeah.
Well, I'm in a similar boat to your husband because I grew up on them, and because of that, I think even the bad ones, they're sort of like a comfort type watch to me.
Yeah, that's my husband too. Yeah,
Yeah.
like we watched like a few months back. We watched like Moonraker. It's like, oh
Classic.
god, it's so bad.
Classic. Don't make me do the end line, the orgasm line. No, I will do it. I believe he's attempting re-entry, sir. and it's double meaning because they're entering the Earth's atmosphere. It's double meaning.
So bad.
Anyway, well, I'm very slowly reviewing all the Bond movies, so maybe I'll entice Jess to follow my reviews along.
Speaking of comfort movies, I watched one of my favorite comfort movies a week ago. It was My Cousin Vinny.
Nice. Good
Never
choice.
seen that movie.
Oh, I need to educate you on this one.
Oh, you need to educate me.
Yes.
Okay.
There are so many one-liners in that movie. It's a hoot. So the premise of it is these two kids from New York are taking a road trip on their way to their college. And they stop at a gas station in this tiny little town in Alabama. And they pick up some food and things, and they're driving on their way again, and they get pulled over. And they initially think it's because one of the kids accidentally took a can of tuna. Like, he didn't realize it. He had put it in his pocket because his hands were full.
Mm.
And he forgot and realized in the car, oh, hey, I didn't pay for this. Kind of a my bad situation. And the cop gets out of the car with a shotgun and says, get out of the car. Hands in the air. And it turns out that they're being booked for murder.
Okay. Yeah.
Because the gas station clerk had been shot and killed.
Oh, crap.
So they're having to get a lawyer, and it turns out the kid that was driving, the one that took the can of tuna, his cousin had passed the bar and is a lawyer. And that's his cousin, Vinny. Vincent Gambini.
Mhm.
And so the movie is Vincent Gambini trying to get his cousin and his friend off of murder charges. But
Fun.
it's great. The judge is, I forget his name, but it's the guy that plays Herman Munster in the Munsters.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. I really like that actor, but I didn't know that was him.
Yes, he's
that's
the
cool.
judge. And they just have a phenomenal time. They do so wonderful. God, so I'm horrible with names. I'm absolutely awful with names. But Vincent Gambini, the lawyer, the main character, is one of the bad guys from Home Alone.
It's Joe Pesci.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, and he is absolutely hilarious in that
Yeah.
movie. It is fantastic. Highly recommend. That is one of my all-time favorite movies.
Oh, okay. That's cool. And yeah, Marissa Tomei, who plays his girlfriend, she
Yes,
won an Oscar for the movie, and
which is well
well
deserved.
deserved. She's excellent. She's always good, but I think never better than in that movie.
Mhm.
And isn't it one of the cousins? Isn't it Ralph Macchio from Karate Kid? Doesn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, I thought
Yeah.
I was watching Karate Kid last night as well, which is funny. But yeah, really good movie. It's been a while since I've seen it, but it's so funny when you were describing the setup. It does make it sound like a darker kind of more like
It sounds dark, but the whole
it's
thing
not
is
once you
just
get into it. Yeah.
oh no, absolutely not. It's so funny. And the trial itself, the way he talks to the witnesses and everything, it's just
Yeah. There's some great lines of
it's great.
dialogue, and like as I said, Marissa Tomei, just her whole personality and
Yeah.
the way she comes across as real. Like it doesn't really
Oh
feel
yeah.
like a
Oh
forced
no.
sort of character. Like
Absolutely not. Everything in
Yeah.
the movie feels organic. The chemistry
Mhm.
between him and his girlfriend it's just spot on. They
Yeah.
feel like a married couple. It's great.
Fixed me up with Marissa Tomei. She said I was just her type.
Really?
Yeah. Do you know the odds of me being anyone's type? I have never been anyone's type. But apparently, this Marissa Tomei loves funny, quirky, bold men.
You know, she won an Academy Award.
Like, I don't know that. My cousin Vinny, I love that. George Costanza, could be on a date with an Oscar winner. An Oscar winner, Jerry. Do you know what that's like? It's like if 50 years ago somebody fixed me up with Katharine Hepburn. Same thing.
Now there's a match, you and Katharine Hepburn.
I mean, you've seen her, right?
Katharine Hepburn? Oh, yeah.
Marissa Tomei.
But the way he talks to some of the witnesses, like when he finishes questioning one of them and proves his point with one of them, he goes, "I'm done with this guy." Like,
yeah.
he's not taking it that seriously at all. It's great.
Yeah. No, it's great. It's great. Some of the best courtroom scenes I've seen.
Oh yeah.
In the movie, and they cast it so well.
I think there was actually an episode of Legalese or Legal that he
Okay.
did on this movie. So I'm not sure if you've seen that channel on YouTube, but he's an actual lawyer and he reviews that movie
Right.
and says what's actually accurate court-wise in that movie. And a lot of it actually is.
It's around the time that Joe Pesci was doing more comedic work as well,
Yeah.
and I think that paid off for him because he, I think otherwise he could have been like straight-jacket a bit into that kind of gangster tough guy style role.
Yeah,
So I think it was a smart change for him at the time.
it definitely was.
Hmm. Okay, so I can sort of knock off 3 movies really, and that's because I've been rewatching the Rocky franchise, and yeah, back to the cheese a little bit. But I've been doing it along with a podcast who have been like doing the whole franchise, and so I've not quite seen all the movies, but I mean they're up to movie 3, which I did actually see in the cinema in the last couple of years. But like I've not really watched it this week, but I've watched 1 and 2, and I did watch 4 just because I think with the Olympics on, I was getting in the sporting mood, and I was watching some boxing one night, so I thought I'd put a Rocky movie on, and I just went with the most cheesy, entertaining one, basically. I was just in the mood for something, switch your brain off, basically. But I think the way it breaks down is that the first couple of movies are actually quite dramatic, quite serious, well done, like dramas almost, a little bit more than the kind of glitzy, like boxing, Hollywood style things. Whereas I think the later movies, 3 and 4 particularly, are the more kind of silly, cheesy, over the top, like training montage style movies. But so I think 1 is a good movie. like in some ways it was a bit ahead of its time. And I found out through listening to these reviews that it was one of the very first movie to use like handheld camera, like that sort of technique. I know that, and Marathon Man, and I think there was one other which might have done it around the time, because this is like mid 70s. I think there's certain things about it which have dated a little bit, like some of it which is meant to be a bit more like dramatic and serious probably does play a little bit cheesy watching it now. But I think it's a good first movie, and Rocky does have a good arc in that first movie. I quite like the fact that they don't go for the predictable sort of Hollywood style ending. I mean, it's quite an old movie. I don't know if I should spoil it or not, but I do like that they don't go for the obvious ending. And I think I like the whole theme of, in some ways, by the end of the movie, he doesn't really care if he wins or loses that match, basically. It's more about, like, proving himself than he can be competitive against this like champion, and also his love for Adrian as well. So I kind of like the result of the match becomes a bit immaterial in that first one. So I think the second one is a solid sequel. It's definitely a step down, and I do find some of the real world Rocky stuff, relationship stuff, dragging a little bit in that one as well. Again, the boxing scenes are quite well done, and the build up to the match is quite well done. Rocky 3 is an interesting one. I think that's a bit more of a fun one. There's a little bit of drama in it as well. It's sort of fun seeing Hulk Hogan play a bad guy. Years before he was a massive bad guy in like the NWO in WCW, because like for wrestling fans, they all know then Hogan left his promotion at the time to star in this movie because they didn't give him the blessing to like do both. But it's sort of, in a way, it's what gave him the profile a little bit to then go on and become such a massive name in wrestling. But like, it's just a fun footnote seeing him play a bad guy like years before he was like in wrestling a bad guy, and now he's a real life bad guy, as we all know. But he's pretty good in the movie, and Mr. T, who's like the main villain. And I think we're getting on to the era where you actually have villains opposing Rocky, whereas in the first two it's not so much about that. And Mr. T's good in the movie as well. It has quite an interesting ending, which isn't really a spoiler, but the very end is just this scene in a gym between Apollo Creed and Rocky. And it's almost like just us two alone without any cameras or fans. We're just going to prove which is the better one. So they do this sort of sparring thing. And it actually cuts to credits, so you don't actually see which one wins. But I like that. I do like that as a choice. But apparently in one of the Creed movies later on, it does reveal which one actually won. But like, I don't think it's revealed in Rocky 4 or any of the Rocky movies. And then, of course, Rocky 4 is the ultimate guilty pleasure with Ivan Drago and the whole Cold War stuff. If he dies, he dies, all that stuff. The flamboyance of like Apollo Creed in that movie, the insane cheesy 80s montages, the power ballads, the cheesy dialogue, and just the ending. The ending is just so memorable. But Rocky ends the Cold War, basically. That's pretty much how that movie ends. The power of Rocky, he talks around an entire nation. It's not just enough that he overcomes the odds and beats Ivan Drago. It's, yeah, he ends the Cold War. That's sort of the footnote on that. But it's insanely fun, and I grew up on it. So it's not the best Rocky movie, but I think it is the most fun Rocky movie. So that's pretty much where I am with that franchise at the moment.
To the Disney nostalgia, and so I watched the live action Aladdin movie, and then I rewatched the Aladdin cartoon movie, and
Oh,
It's
girl, I could talk Disney all day. I got a toddler. It's on 24/7.
it's like there are things like really like the costumes of the live
Mhm.
action. Like Jasmine's outfits are absolutely gorgeous.
Yes.
And I do think that, they tried to make the, some of the characters and the way that they talked about characters and, portrayed them, they tried to be less offensive, which I think for the most part they did pretty well.
Mhm.
But there are a lot of things that I don't like that they did that I feel like really take away from the original. Well, first, I will say no one can replace Robin Williams.
No one.
And so I am very glad that Will Smith just was like, I'm going to make Genie my own character.
Mhm.
I think that really helped in a lot of ways. So it's like I don't know which actor it was, but it's the guy that like whenever Robin Williams was like, no, I'm not going to do Genie because he was in the middle of a lawsuit with Disney. And then so they like put in this new guy and you're like, who the heck is this guy? And so I'm really glad that Disney didn't try and force going back and being like, no, we need to replicate what Robin Williams did. So that I think is a positive note, but the whole girl power, woman power thing, like Jasmine from the cartoon, and it's like like I said, I watched the cartoon like right afterwards. She's already saying like, I don't agree with the law. I don't want this. I mean, it does come off a little bit more of like, wait, I'm gonna like whine about it, but not like do anything about it. But to be fair, there's only so much you can do about it.
Yeah.
It's like it's the law. But like with this Jasmine, they just like really upped it to a point where I almost thought it was distracting.
Mhm.
Especially the scene where like Jafar takes over and she's getting taken away, and they're
The
like, let's
song.
pause the movie so she
Yeah.
can have an empowering musical number.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
it's
they
just-
could have taken that whole number out.
it's like I do like that song. It's a catchy song, but like it really messed up the pacing. And
It
you're
really
also
did.
like, what the heck? It's like all up to this point, these songs have been in real time with the movie, and all of a sudden
Yeah.
you're pausing it. Like they're just changing how they're narrating the movie in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
So that was really frustrating. I also don't like the changes that they made with Aladdin as far as his motivation for continuing to lie.
Mhm.
I thought was kind of weak, but yeah. So consensus is as of course with most Disney live actions, the original is definitely better. But I do appreciate that they tried to improve the things that they thought were flawed. Because the movie does have flaws, the original cartoon, but it's like, as with a lot of the live action we see with Disney, with them trying to fix flaws from the original, they are creating other flaws that are pretty glaring too. So it's like neither one is perfect. They almost need to like mishmash them together. But it's like, yeah. But oh man, it's like Robin Williams still kills me because it's like
Yes.
there's this one part where he like, it's like, especially like as a kid, you're just like, oh, Genie's just like, funny and exciting and stuff. But it's like as an adult, you're like starting to understand the jokes he's saying. And, like when he's like, I love you, Al, but I don't want to like pick curtains for you.
I don't want to pick out curtains or anything.
Yeah, it's like, oh my god. It's just some of the quick humor that's like, if you're not paying attention, you would totally miss it. So it's like I miss Robin Williams for that, but yeah, but that's what I have for Aladdin.
Okay, excellent.
So I got to see, and I think this is honestly, it's between this and Deadpool and Wolverine for my top for the month.
Okay.
But I saw Inside Out 2.
Okay. Yeah.
And it really does a fantastic job keeping keeping the themes kind of with the first movie. Riley is growing and changing, and it can be crazy and messy and unpredictable, and that's okay. And they do a really good job. They introduce some new emotions. I don't want to give too much away. I know it's been out for a little bit now, but still, if anyone hasn't seen it yet, highly recommend. The new emotions, they're so relatable.
I know there's one that's memed a lot that I hear a lot of people relate to me.
Oh, there's a couple. I know they've put the names of a couple of them out there for even before the movie aired. So they do have anxiety, and my other favorite was embarrassment. Honestly, it was great. The first 10 to 15 minutes it was just, as a parent too, I'm sitting here like, well, this is a preview of what I'm going to be dealing with in about 10 years or so. Great. Looking forward to it. But it was so funny, and you can remember just going through puberty at the time, like, yeah, that sounds about right. It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So they did a really great job. They honestly nailed it. I love that they evolved not just the islands of personality, but they evolved that so it's not like a bunch of core memories, like 5 or 6 core memories that make up her islands of personality. It's a lot more complex than that.
Yeah.
And I love that they changed that and evolved it. So it's a good successor to that first movie.
Yeah. Sounds like they've done a good job in continuing on what they built from the first one.
I liked the first movie, but it's like it's not really my favorite Pixar movie, and it doesn't really catch my attention that much. Yeah, it's like I tried rewatching it recently to see if I was interested in the second one. I didn't make it through. I was like, I had to stop. It's just like it just didn't capture my attention that much. But it's like I do think they do a good job of like portraying like phases of life, relationships, things like that. But it's like I feel like there's other movies that Pixar does a little bit better.
That's fair.
That's fair.
I think you'll like the second one better, though.
Okay.
Mhm.
I'll give it a
Give
watch.
it a solid try at least.
Yeah, yeah, I'll give it a try.
It's worth it. I think you'll really relate to, especially anxiety.
Yeah, that's the one that everyone's like, anxiety is you. I'm like, quit calling me out.
And I love when the new emotions are introduced and anxiety is starting to talk and everything. I love how fear is sitting here like, oh, you and I are going to be best friends.
That's in cinemas now, and I know it's just come up to rent on streaming places a little bit, and eventually will go on Disney Plus as well, in case guys miss it in the cinema. So yeah, sounds good. So I'll do 2 together because I just realized with them written down here, they're directed by a former husband and wife. Actually, one movie directed by each, so there's a bit of a theme, but they're both rewatches. They're both movies I enjoyed growing up. The first one is I did a rewatch of Point Break, the action movie with directed by Catherine Bigelow.
It's been a while since I've seen it, but I remember really liking that one.
It's a favorite of mine. Keanu Reeves in quite an early role.
Great one.
Yeah, perfect casting and a great name, Johnny Utah as well. One of my favorite character names ever. And it just sums up the character so well. So he's a new sort of inexperienced FBI agent. He gets transferred to like a bigger division, and at the same time, there's this group of criminals who are robbing banks, and they go by the ex-presidents because they wear masks of the ex-presidents. And I don't know how much of a spoiler it is really, but the theme of the movie is that they're going with the waves because they are surfers. So they sort of rob banks during like surf season type thing. And it's partly a way for them to be harder to like detect and pick up by the law. And you've also got Gary Busey in there. He's like the more experienced sort of like older like partner who gets saddled with Keanu Reeves' character. And you've got Patrick Swayze, who's, I hesitate to call him a villain. Obviously, that's the way he is in the movie. Like, he is sort of the antagonist. But the whole point of the movie is that the Keanu Reeves character goes undercover as basically like a surfer. And there's a lot of humor about him having no idea how to surf and how he just looks ridiculous. At one point, he gets ragged on because he has like a pink surfing board. And there's lots of stuff like that. But like, he is taught by the Tyler Perry character, who's Tori Perry. Tyler Perry, someone completely different. Tori Perry. That would be a different sort of movie. But Tori Perry, who people know from like Free Willy and Tank Gal and one or two other things. But she's an ex-girlfriend of the Patrick Swayze character. So she's sort of like an in a way for the Johnny Utah character. So, yeah, the whole theme of the movie is that he starts falling in love with the surfing side of things, and he starts getting so attached to the Swayze character and his group. And it's kind of this thing of, is he compromising his investigation? Because he also falls for the girl as well. So, like, is he getting too close to her? And that's like the setup. So it's an action style thriller with, again, some male bonding kind of themes going on under the surface. But I mean, that's one of the interesting things about Kathryn Bigelow, is she does present things in a more masculine way, considering she's a female director, and she really gets inside that world. And in this, she really gets inside the Zen sort of surfing world. I mean, I think it's very hilarious. Then you've got a member of the Red Hot Chili Peppers in like a cameo role, which is just perfect. But like, yeah, there's all sorts of things going on. There's lots of like entertaining dialogue and back and forth, some witty gags. But it just looks beautiful as a movie. Like, the action scenes are so well shot and so immersive, because that's something Bigelow does so well. So you get like a famous sort of skydiving scene that's very well done. You've got obviously the surfing scenes. She really seems to understand kind of the poetry of surfing really in those scenes, and it comes across very sort of authentic. And yeah, just various things, like you get really like sort of gripping sort of chase sequences and really strong characters as well. I think it's a bit of a shame Patrick Swayze didn't play villains more, because I think he is a really good villain in this. I think there's just something about his charisma where he does have that bad boy style charisma, and he's almost like a bit of an anti-hero in this. But it's like, yeah, I think when he did play villains, he was really good, and he was actually a pretty good physical action star as well. So maybe you had to grow up a little bit on this one to appreciate it, but it because of that, I have a lot of nostalgia. But I still think it's one of Kathryn Bigelow's best movies. I really love it, and I always have a fun time whenever I rewatch it. Yeah, really well cast. So that's Point Break. And yeah, I just realized the connection, and I won't talk much about this because I'm going to do a review of this one, but this is obviously a timeless classic. And I rewatched Terminator as well, which is James Cameron, and they used to be married. So that's what the connection is. Yeah, I don't
always a classic.
Always a classic. And it might be a hot take, but I still prefer the first one to T2. I know that's a bit of an unpopular opinion, but
I mean, it was the one that set it all off.
Yeah.
Fair.
Yeah, they cast it so well, and it's just so inventive. A great story, great action scenes. The music's great.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, we've got a review on the way, so I won't go too much into it. But me and Rachel did do a review. And one thing I did appreciate, which when I watched it this time, and I didn't realize it's actually quite a short movie. It's only 102 minutes.
Yeah.
And yeah, it doesn't feel rushed. It doesn't feel like it's dragging. I think it just feels like the right length for the movie. And it's really well paced. And it's just impressive. Then they go through all the major beats. And it just feels like a really tight movie, which probably would work on its own really well if you never got a sequel. And obviously I'm glad we did, but like I think if you never had Terminator 2, this would stand alone really well.
Yeah.
But it just shows you how impressive the writing of the movie is. Then they did so much so effectively in like 102 minutes. And it sort of frustrates me nowadays with movies that they're just so overlong and so kind of convoluted. They're trying to do too much. And yeah, I think there should be more sort of movies like this, really. But yeah, the original Terminator, still a classic, still holds up.
You know, talking about the movie length, like, I don't know if this is true or not, but I've at least heard that the reason why movies have gotten longer is because of the Lord of the Rings
Yes.
trilogy that came out, and
I
that
believe
they're like audiences are now expecting movies to be longer. And I don't know who decided that, but
I mean, they don't have to be, but I feel like Lord of the Rings proved that there will be people that want to see a movie that long.
Yeah.
I feel like it has to be the right kind of movie.
Mhm.
Because there are
Yeah.
some that come out that are super long that you're sitting
they
here
feel
like,
dragged out.
this is
Yeah.
taking forever. The pacing is all off. They're not keeping the audience entertained. So it really does depend on the movie. If people are willing to see a movie that long, then it is doable. And they can add more meat to the story.
Watched Elemental and Lightyear. Elemental, I don't really hear a lot of people talking about it, but I think it's really good. Like, I will say it gives, at least in the beginning, some major Zootopia vibes.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like, instead of like Zootopia kind of like addressing like racism, Elemental is more like cultural differences.
Yeah.
Things like that. And so, but I think it's good to like differentiate the two. Have two separate movies to address those two different issues in our society. And I think the way that they did the fire was really cool, and water, and the even though it is very similar to Zootopia in the different like elements that they have, I think it's still cool, the creativity on like how they like built this society of elements. And I don't know, it's just a very much like endearing movie where like, especially like whenever the water guy like quote unquote dies at the end and then he comes back, but it does definitely hit you in the feels in different layers. And anyways, I really enjoy that movie. I think Zootopia is definitely a stronger movie for me. And I like that I liked how they did Zootopia a little bit better, but Elemental is by no means like a bad movie. So yeah. And like Lightyear.
Honestly, I like Elemental better than Soul. I know that's probably kind of a hot take, but
Okay.
I haven't seen Soul, so I have no comment on that. So for Lightyear, I had seen it before, and the very first time I watched it, I was really disappointed. But now, like, rewatching it and knowing what I was getting into, I was able to appreciate the movie a little bit more. I will say that I grew up with the Lightyear like TV series, and so whenever they came out with a movie, I was really hoping they were going to base a lot of the lore and history and characters based off of the TV show, because the TV show was actually pretty good and pretty creative. But nope, started from ground zero and worked their way up. But it's like the overarching story, I think is kind of boring and lackluster. But I will say that the relationship between Buzz and, of course, I forgot her name because I'm terrible with names, but his partner, and then him working with her granddaughter and kind of continuing that relationship in a way is like really like sweet and touching in a lot of ways. And it's like I'm glad that they brought the cat character, the cat animatronic, in there, because it really helped made it a little bit more lighthearted, but it's still like it's a different tone than what Pixar typically does. It's just like a darker tone movie, and overall I feel like they do a pretty good job, but it's not really, I wouldn't consider it a classic movie. I wouldn't really consider it an amazing movie. It's just like, you know, if you're in the mood to watch it, it's worth the watch. But it's just yeah, I'm still mad that they
definitely not their strongest movie.
Yeah, definitely not their strongest. And I really wish, like, and what ticks me off with the TV show is it is so hard. Like, Disney doesn't have it on Disney Plus, and it is extremely, but they are also like someone had posted.
How come it's not? You don't know?
I have no idea. And someone had actually been kind enough to post the episodes on YouTube, but of course Disney was like copyright striking them. But it's like, but then put the show on Disney Plus.
Yeah.
It's like,
they want it dead and buried.
Yeah, I'm assuming
I didn't even know there was a show. So that's
I didn't either, honestly.
Yeah.
No, I was low key like obsessed with that show for a period of time. Like, it was really good. Like, they had Zorg, they had him, and so it's like a lot of it was like you know, situations where like Buzz and his team Zurg, there we go. Where Buzz and his team get in like terrible situations. Zurg is like, haha, I'm finally going to destroy Buzz Lightyear, and then, you know, of course they like get away, but it's like you know,
spoiler there.
Yeah.
I'm not going to watch it now.
It happens like 10 times. Backstory on the actual like team that he's working with. Like there's a oh man, I forgot her name, but it's like a alien princess, and you're like figuring out like why she like left her world and everything behind just to like become a space ranger and stuff like that. And so it's like they have like these different characters that are outside of what we know or recognize in Toy Story that they go a little bit deeper into and expand pretty well.
So you prefer the show to the movie by the sounds of it?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because the movie really has nothing to do with the show at all, and the movie is just kind of like lackluster, and it's just a different tone. While the TV show is more like literally like a space adventures TV show where, you know, there's lots of vibrant colors. The situations are absolutely like crazy because they're in these different alien worlds. And then you have like the villain dynamic of like, I'm gonna, you know, destroy you, and you know, and you know, the hero always comes out on top, and so it's just like, you know, it's just a fun show.
Actually, really gotten into Alice in Wonderland, which makes me infinitely happy. So
Nice,
as she is named for that. It is just such an acid trip of a movie, though. Watching it as an adult, it makes so much sense as a kid. I remember it making so much sense as a kid, and now watching it, I'm sitting here like, what in the hell kind of mushrooms are they on?
For maybe a few, just because I've been doing some on a theme, and like some of these I think definitely fall into the very low budget, like so bad they're good type territory. So like B movies. I've been watching a lot of 1984 movies just because it's 40 years and I've been doing that on my channel as like a bit of a theme. I did come across a gem actually, which is a Wes Craven movie I'd never heard of, and it's called Invitation to Hell. And so it's a great title. The reason I hadn't heard of it is that it was actually made for TV. So it's from 1984, and yeah, it really goes places. It's a lot of fun. It's definitely, because it's Wes Craven directing, like the quality of like the production and the atmosphere is better than the standard kind of, because this was just on like ABC or something like when it aired. So that's obviously a lot better. And it's one of those, you do get a lot of faces in the cast, like Joanne Cassidy's in it, who people know from like Blade Runner and Who Framed Roger Rabbit. Really good actress. It's also got, the airport scene in Home Alone, like that old couple. It's got like the guy from the old couple. He's in like a small role. So very distinct sort of character actor. Yeah, and it really goes places. It's a really fun kind of so bad it's good style movie where there's a little bit of a twist, because the whole setup is then a family move to a new location because the father, who's in like a software type company or something, he works on microwave or something like that anyway, but he gets like a promotion, and the whole supernatural plot is meant to be that the family, because they try to like engage with the family at work because he's got this promotion. So the whole idea is that they're trying to persuade the father of the house into a cult, basically. So it's like, we're saying you've got access to this secret club because you've got this promotion, and there's this sinister supernatural cult behind the whole thing. So that's where like Invitation to Hell comes from, the time, because it's literally almost in hell, like this club.
Sounds a little like Devil's Advocate.
Yeah, a little bit. But the twist is almost it's his family who gets like initiated, not him. And then he has to save the family. And I kid you not, the big end scene is him in like an astronaut outfit going into hell to save his family. That's literally the big like end sort of set piece. I mean, how can you not love a movie where that's like the big end thing? So I really enjoyed it. It's definitely so bad it's good type thing. As I said, a little bit of production because it's Wes Craven and stuff, and a little bit more of an atmosphere, but like it's just a bonkers movie where if you like this sort of wacky type movie, I think you'll get a lot out of it. So it definitely fits into the so bad it's good type movie for sure. So I enjoyed that one. That's on YouTube, not surprisingly. And I can run through a few others. Like I watched a movie called Microwave Massacre, so another great title. And that's one where you're like, well, why is it called Microwave Massacre? And I think after a while, it's just like this guy becomes a killer and he kind of cooks their remains in the microwave, and that's but it's such a loose thing, like, because the microwave barely features in like the movie at all, but that's kind of like the small link. And it's from the late 70s. There's a lot of campy like dialogue and like humor. You get this ridiculous sort of porn style music which plays a lot. It's so in your face. Like it literally opens with like a big breasted woman walking down the street, and it's playing this porn style jazzy type music. And you get her walking through like a construction site, and they're all kind of like ogling.
Oh my god!
But it's just so in your face. I think that's what makes it so funny to watch. And you get, again, just some of these really like so bad they're good, like line deliveries and like the relationship between the main guy and his wife. But it's one of those movies where it makes very little sense, and I think that's part of the sort of charm of it. So that one I quite enjoyed. I also watched the original Piranha from the late 70s.
Oh my god!
So, I know we get pretty low on Friday nights. We've been much lower than the original Piranha, believe me. But But it's directed by Joe Dante, Gremlins director, so it's one of his
Yep.
very early movies. And Roger Corman, who we lost recently, he produced the movie as well. And yeah, it's kind of, it's not bad. Like I didn't really enjoy it as much as I was hoping. A very low budget movie, and they definitely focus a little bit too much on the underwater stuff and like the creatures, and it just highlights how bad the effects are because it is very low budget.
Yeah.
But it sort of has a sleazy straight to video type charm to it. It does drag a little bit, like the ending of the movie does drag quite a lot, but it's not a bad one. It's one that's worth ticking off. And speaking of that sort of thing, I also rewatched Children of the Corn.
Oh my God.
So again, draining the bottom of the pool. But that of course has a Linda Hamilton role, very early Linda Hamilton. Bad actually. Like I think the setting is quite effective in this one, the small town setting, and it's just got this very grainy sort of feel to it, which wouldn't really work if it was a more high budget type movie. The kids are suitably creepy in it. They cast the kids very well. It's another movie where it sort of feels a little bit like a short film stretched out to feature length, because it really feels like it's amping up to the end about 20 minutes, half an hour before it actually ends.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of padding. There's a lot of like scenes that definitely could have been cut earlier in the movie. Just stuff with them in the car, like the main couple.
I remember falling asleep a lot in that movie.
Yeah. It's not the best, but it's I think for what it is, it's quite well done in bits, but again, it's a little bit more on the cheesy kind of so bad it's good type vibe. But it's and I know they did an awful lot of those movies, and I think they just got worse and worse. So probably rewatching this one, it suddenly seems a lot better compared with some of the laters. And well, speaking of 84, I did sort of find another sort of gem from that year, and that is a sci-fi movie called Dreamscape. I don't know if you...
Oh,
I
yeah.
haven't seen that in forever.
Okay. Well, that's the thing. I didn't grow up on this movie, so it's one people have mentioned which I've come across. And again, I think for the time it's quite an original premise, because there's like an assassination attempt on the president, or at least the president's life is in jeopardy. And the whole thing is that the Dennis Quaid character has to try and save him. But a lot of the movie takes place inside this virtual reality type world. So the killer is trying. So it's almost a little bit Nightmare on Elm Street, because the killer is trying to get to the president in his dreams, basically. The faces, you've got Max von Sydow in there, you've got Christopher Plummer, who I think plays one of the main villains. He's very good in the movie. And I watched it just the other night, actually, and it was a bit slow getting going, but once I got into it, I enjoyed it quite a bit. Again, some of the effects have dated, but I think some of the effects for this kind of movie make sense as well. And it has a really wild ending, which is pretty hard to forget. So, yeah, I would probably recommend that one as a little bit of a sci-fi gem, bit of a forgotten gem from the 80s. So, yeah, that's on... Well, I think it's on Amazon here, but probably Hulu in the States and various places. It's also on Tubi. Oh, I watched it on Tubi, actually. Turkey of the month is the Amazon movie Jackpot. It's or as I like to call it, Shitpot, basically.
Already then.
Yeah, it's terrible. It's Aka Fenmer and John Cena, both of who I quite like, but they have like zero chemistry. And the whole setup is that it's in the near future, so it's like 2030, and the setup is then in the future people are like killing each other like for their like lottery winnings, So if someone wins the lottery, it's that kind of thing. And so Awkwafemra's character wins the lottery, and John Cena plays one of these agents who you can hire to protect them. And the problem is, it sort of feels like quite a fun sci-fi premise, but they don't really treat it as a sci-fi. They treat it as a full-blown type comedy. So it's like, well, why are we laughing at all these people being killed off in like these sort of cartoony sort of ways? So
Yeah.
I think that's one of the problems, is they should have just made it a sci-fi movie and just treated it a bit more seriously. As I said, the leads have no chemistry, and there's just something about bad humor that just grates a bit more. Like, because I think when you watch like a drama or something like that, even if it's bad, you can maybe make fun of it, or you can at least, it fades into the background.
Yeah.
But there's something about bad humor which really just grates, and this is just so cringe and cheesy. And I mean, just an example of like the terrible humor, like the guy who owns the lottery is literally called Johnny Grand. So that's what they're going for. And he wears like a flamboyant type shirt or like jacket, and it's so lame. This is my least favorite movie of the year out of like new movies. Anyway.
Wow.
Dang.
Absolute, like, I just hated
Got a few
everyone.
more months to go.
Yeah, I hated everyone on screen in this movie. And it's one of those movies as well where you get like an extended outtakes in the end credits, and that's never a good sign. And the outtakes, they're so unfunny. Like, the cast are just cracking up left, right, and it's like, why are you cracking up this much? This stuff isn't that funny. And it's one of those things as well, because it's got, you know, the guy who played Stanley in the US Office, he's in it. And
Okay.
And there's a scene with him where it's an outtake, and the line delivery in the outtake is better than the line delivery in the actual movie. So they cut the wrong version of his like line delivery.
That's
Like,
bad.
yeah, that just shows you. So yeah, I mean, it's streaming obviously, so if you want to give it a go, but I really wouldn't bother. It's so bad. So couple more. Another one is like an indie movie. It did get a small cinema release, but it's now on streaming as well. And that's a film called Miller's Girl with Jenna Ortega and Martin Freeman. And it's a little bit sort of Fatal Attraction, but a more modern Fatal Attraction, because she plays like an English student and he plays like a teacher. And she's like the new student in his class. And he's kind of in this loveless marriage, and his career isn't really going anywhere, whereas his wife is quite successful. Is like quite a successful author. And the Jenna Ortega character is kind of the only one who probably takes him seriously, is a big fan of like this one big poem he did. And he gives her like a special assignment. He gives her this assignment where he wants her to do a piece that's inspired by her favorite author. And one of the more clunky parts of the movie is the Miller. Like, that's her favorite author. And the teacher's name is Miller. His surname's Miller. So it's like, okay, dial it down a bit, film. But it's like, that's kind of the author she goes with. And there's this whole thing with him where, well, okay, Henry Miller, he's so risque, like, we don't really teach him, so maybe come up with another author, but she talks him into it. And so there's an attraction between him. That's kind of between them. That's where the movie's going. And I won't really spoil it, but like, as things go on, it's implied then it sort of does become one way, and she becomes obsessed with him and threatens to turn the tables on him. So, as I said, it's a little bit Fatal Attraction. It's a little bit Crush, that movie with Alicia Silverstone from the mid-90s. It's also got a little bit of a Cruel Intentions vibe, this kind of idea of rich people kind of letting loose and playing with things and having fun, kind of using other people as their playthings almost. So I think it's okay. I think it's pretty solid. The leads are both good. I think they've got good chemistry. And I want to say it feels a bit like Jenna Ortega wanted to do the movie as a bit of something outside her comfort zone. Like, it does feel like she's playing a bit against type compared with the roles we know her for. But it's a weird one to sort of do in 2024 because we are now in the Me Too sort of era. And I think in the end, it didn't go as far. Like, it wasn't as edgy as I was hoping. Like, I think either you wanted it to be really edgy and go to some uncomfortable places, or you kind of maybe wanted it, I don't know, maybe to like be a bit more serious or that kind of thing. I mean, in the end, it's quite playful, and I think I appreciated that about it because it might have been more uncomfortable and cringe if it wasn't so playful. So it's a solid drama with a couple of decent twists in there. Not bad, not as good as it could have been, but I think it's worth it for the two leads. So that's Miller's Girl, which is streaming now. And the other movie, which was a rewatch, is I rewatched Mallrats, the Kevin Smith movie. So I did this because I've been sort of watching stuff to kind of, pay tribute to Shannon Doherty because of her sad passing. And she is one of the leads in Mallrats, and it was a rewatch. And I think it's okay. I think it's a solid enough movie. It's the movie he did after Clerks, so it sort of shows what a massive success Clerks was. Mm-hmm. It's definitely not as good as Clerks. It's also not as good as Dogma, which I think is his other, probably really strong movie. But it's definitely better than some of the movies he did later. It's a little bit broy, and some things have dated with it, but it's a solid enough watch. And I think, again, Shannon Doherty is excellent in it. She was always excellent. She brings a lot of personality to it. She's very feisty and tough. And, it's a pretty solid cast. There's also a fun cameo by Stan Lee, who's pretty much playing himself. And he has a lot of fun with that cameo. So that's Mallrats. So that's not bad. An early Kevin Smith movie. What your movie picks would be each?
Yeah, I think my movie pick for this month is definitely Deadpool and Wolverine. I think it's a pretty solid movie. I definitely, the humor isn't for everyone, but it's definitely my type of humor. So, yeah.
I have 3, and one of them is going to be a preview of one of our episodes for the podcast. It's Deadpool and Wolverine, Inside Out 2, and then one that we're doing an episode over on Horror Movie Tea is Totally Killer.
I knew it. That is a really good movie. That is a really good movie.
It's a lot of fun. It was better than I expected it to be. It is a comedy horror. So they
with
actually
with time travel.
And they walk a fine line between darker themes and comedy, and they do a really good job with that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's like the characters are it's fun to watch the characters, and also they time travel back to the 80s, and they go hard on the 80s.
You get slapped in the face with 80s.
Yeah, there's jogger suits, smoking everywhere. There's station wagons. It's
channeled station wagons.
Yes. Oh man, it's just it's so great. But you can, it's one of those movies where you can tell that they had a lot of fun doing it. So definitely recommend that one. It's like I normally
Nice.
don't enjoy how typical time traveler movies are done. But this one I actually didn't mind too much. We talk about it a little bit later in the episode coming out, but it definitely has some flaws. But in general, it's like a very entertaining movie for sure. Lots of laughs.
Technically, I've got two because Terminator is a masterpiece. So,
Of course.
if you've never seen Terminator, I recommend that. But I think just because it's a little less known, I might give it to the Michael J. Fox documentary because that was really worthwhile checking out. So that's on Apple TV, as I said.
On at least on Netflix in the US, there's a show called America's Sweethearts, and it's regarding the Dallas Cowboy cheerleaders. And it's like I'm not really a sports person, but of course, since I live in the Dallas area, it's like I've heard of the Dallas Cowboy cheerleaders and seen them, but it's like I never really paid attention to them. But it's essentially like, it's kind of a documentary. It's more like following these girls through. I think is either 2022 or 2023, like one of those seasons, and showing like the tryouts and how those work and stuff like that. And I had no idea that the Dallas Cowboy cheerleaders were considered like some of the best cheerleader groups in like the country, if not the world. And
it's a whole thing.
Yeah, it's a whole thing. But it's like I also like the fact that they bring to, that there's two sides of the same coin, where first like they show how talented the girls are, how hard they work for what they're doing, how hard they work to get to where they are, and how hard the brand as a whole works to keep up this image of the girls. But on the second hand, it does mention a lot of problems that I hope this will kind of help address, where they're not paid. They're pretty much paid minimum wage, which isn't a livable wage in the US. And so pretty much all of the cheerleaders have part-time jobs or full-time jobs. Like one of them that they follow was an actual like dentist. And so it's like she would, be working all day and then be practicing after work for like 4 to 6 hours. And, because of the fact that they're not paid that much, but they have all of these obligations that they're required to do, they're not getting quality sleep. They have to go out of their way to try and make sure that they're getting proper nutrition. So it's like it definitely also brought a lot of issues to light. But it is one of those docu-series where it's not for everyone. I just found it interesting because it's like it's in Dallas, and so it's like close, and it's like I didn't really realize the type of energy that went into that brand as a whole. But I can also picture some people being like, I'm not interested in that. So that one's kind of like a take or leave, but I at least thought it was interesting.
And I think that one's based on a podcast, isn't it, originally? I'm sure there was a podcast.
I'm not sure, honestly.
I think it might be. It was definitely covering the same subject. But, and I know there's also that series, Cheer, that documentary series on Netflix. And I've only seen 2 episodes, but that's quite a good insight into how seriously this is taken and how competitive it is.
A fair bit of anime, and I think we would probably agree our top pick for this month has been Dahlia in Bloom.
Oh,
okay.
It's a bit different than what we normally watch. It is still technically an isekai. The main character died at her desk as an office worker, and she woke up in a new world as a baby, basically. So she's starting a new life. Her father in this new world is a magic artificer. So he creates magic objects. and he
Okay.
imbues different objects with magic so they can do different things. So she is creating different things as a magic artificer herself. Like she went into the same profession, and she's creating a lot of things from the world that she originally was in, like refrigerators and blow dryers and things, just little convenience things, and just to make people's lives easier. And she's trying different small things, and a lot of her projects end up like taking off. Like people absolutely love them. She gets huge orders, and she's like, I don't know why this is blowing up. I made this on a whim. But it's turning into a big thing. It's still ongoing right now. It's partway through the first season, and we are living for it, honestly. So it's been a lot of fun.
Okay. And what's that called again?
Dahlia in Bloom.
Okay. So that's an animated series.
It's Crunchyroll.
Crunchyroll. Okay. Nice. Okay. Well, my first pick is also an animated series, and that is Batman Caped Crusader.
Oh.
So this is on Amazon Prime.
That's the new one, right?
The new one, yeah.
Yeah.
So season 1, there's 10 episodes. It has been renewed for a second season. And it's like a Bad Robot production. So you've got J.J. Ambrose involved. You've also got Matt Reeves as a producer who did the recent Batman movie. And you've also got Ed Brubaker, who's quite a well-known comic book writer. So he's involved as well, which I think for a lot of fans is a good sort of sign. But this one is going back to quite the early days with Batman. So it almost feels like the 40s era a little bit, because in the first season, not a lot of people in Gotham sort of know who he is. So there's that little bit of like mistrust with him, like who is this guy type thing? Is he more of a criminal? All that sort of stuff. And the animation style is definitely leaning like quite noir, a bit like Batman the Animated Series, but a little bit vintage as well, with some of the looks of like the costumes and what have you, or the design of the costumes anyway. And I think it's good. I think it's pretty good overall. They've done things to try and modernize it, and some of the themes. So like there's a plot to do with like racism or police corruption. There's actually a female penguin, which I know will drive a certain portion of the internet insane. So
Of course.
we'll have them have at that. But yeah, I think it's pretty good overall. Like it's always going to pale in comparison, because Batman the Animated Series is just so good. And
Iconic.
yeah, and the voice cast doesn't really match up to that in this. The one sort of standout is that they've got Christina Ricci as Catwoman. So that's a real gem, and quite a get right now, you know, because she's on a bit of a roll because of Yellow Jackets and one or two other things. So that's a great sort of get. Yeah, the voice cast, because that's one of the things the animated series from the 90s is known for, such a great voice cast, and this can't really live up to that. But this one definitely isn't as good. Like it's not as dynamic, and I think with certain plots they go a bit too much into, okay, we're trying to make this a bit more gritty, a bit more realistic. And they kind of overstep the mark in some cases. Like they sort of forget, yeah, this is a comic book, and like the skill of it is that you make it quite lifelike, but it also retains some of the colorful nature of a comic book. And yeah, it's just not quite as dynamic or entertaining as like that original animated series. But there are some cool ideas in it, and I think some of the updates to the characters I'm definitely on board with. Like I really like what they do with Barbara Gordon, for example, how they make her a lot more feisty and tough and like independent. So definitely worth a look. And It's good and it's been renewed for a second season because now they can expand on this first season and do a lot more. But it's good. It's pretty solid first season, and I think if you're a fan of the animated series, you would get some stuff out of this. So that's Batman Cape Crusader.
That's the pick of the month, which might be controversial for Code Geass fans, but it's Code Geass Rosé of the Recapture. So I don't know if you're familiar with Code Geass. It's an older anime that was like ended in like 2010, and it's kind of had a recent
Resurgence.
Yeah, resurgence. As a lot of older things are nowadays, but Code Geass as like it's like a dark alternative history anime where like in the original series they walk through that like it's an alternative history of like if America lost the Revolutionary War and kind of like Britain and America became like one giant superpower and just like slowly started taking over the world. And the main character of the Code Geass series is a prince of Britannia. Oh yeah, they call it the country that is like the new America or whatever. It's called Britannia, and exile prince from the Britannian royal family like starts a rebellion because that country very much promotes like social Darwinism, racism. Like it's very much you fight your way to the top, and those that are at the top like severely discriminate against people lower than them. And so he's trying to essentially create like a better world for his sister, who is
She's
blind.
disabled, right?
Yeah, and she's in a wheelchair. And so he starts a whole rebellion and is like fighting against it. And of course, like the series, I mean, it's not really a spoiler, but it's like the series ends and, you know, he's successful and all of that. But so they've recently done like a resurgence of like a continuation where it's about... It's like the world has been peaceful for like 4 years after the original series ended, but there's like a certain faction of like extreme Britannians that are like trying to take over and kind of reclaim power back. And so it's like a brand new set of characters that are like fighting against it. And it's like it definitely doesn't compare to the original anime. Like with scale, with like ability of the characters, stuff like that. But the anime budget, like whenever Code Geass was originally made, it was not predicted to be successful because it's actually not based off of any manga. Like they started from scratch, which those animes tend to not do as well. So it was super low budget. But with this one, you know, it has a full-on budget and the animation is absolutely gorgeous. And those who like mecha animes and like Gundams and stuff like that, the people that so it's Clamp that created and designed the characters, and then the people that created Gundams and designed those mechas also designed the ones in Code Geass. And it's a little bit lame, but the mechas are called Nightmares with a K in the front.
Okay.
So it's like nightmares. Haha. Anyways, but it's like the nightmare battles in this series are so cool because they make it like slow enough where you can tell what's going on. But like the minor movements and details that they have with the battle is like really interesting, to where it's like you can I don't know. They have taken a lot of care to make sure that the battles are interesting. The animation, like I said, is absolutely beautiful. The storyline, it's like the new main character is interesting and it's definitely very fan servicey for like the original fans. But some of the twists, like I watched the new episode yesterday of a major twist for the villain of the series, and it's like, really?
Mhm.
That's what you're going with. But regardless, it's the series is very nostalgic for me. It's one of my favorite anime of all time because it's way more complex. Like there's so many different layers to the anime. Like if you just want a surface level anime that you can watch and just enjoy, then fine. But if you want to dig into the different themes, the different tones, go, and they have like so much lore that they built around the series that they never even mentioned in the series. But if you like dig and like read the spin-off mangas and all of that, you can find that out. So it's like they went through so much effort for very little reason, but it's like it just makes it so much more tangible and all of that. But anyway, so regardless, that's I think it's a really good series. This series definitely has its flaws, the new one,
Mhm.
but I'm still enjoying the heck out of it, even though it's like Code Geass. It very much plays on like Shakespearean tragedy. So it very much is a continuation of that, but also like a level of like ridiculousness that you're like, it's almost funny. But I'm still getting a kick out of it, so that's what I got.
It's another anime, of course,
Of course.
but it's Failure Frame.
Okay.
And this one, instead of a reborn in another world kind of thing, they were summoned into a different world. It was this class, like all on a bus. The whole busload of people got summoned to a different world, and they meet this goddess or someone who claims to be a goddess, and she gives them all different rankings, like different abilities and things. When they are transported there, and it's kind of a mixed bag roulette kind of thing. So she doesn't know what all they're going to have or what their rankings are until they're there. And when they all are sorted and everything, and figure out what their rankings are, the main character is the absolute lowest rank, and he's the only one. And she's like, well, all of you are going to fight against the big bad, and we have to call the weak ones because you're not going to make it anyway. So we're going to send you to this dungeon. If you make it out of the dungeon, we will not interfere with you. You can live however you want. So she sends him to the dungeon. Well, that dungeon has a 0 survival rate. So he comes across these like minotaurs and cockatrices and like all these ridiculous monsters, and he has to fight his way out. And once he does, then he's like, all right, she's going down. Like, I'm gunning for the goddess now. So it's been a lot of interesting fights. Even though he's the lowest rank, his abilities are kind of a cheat. Like, they work so well. So he's trying to figure out how he can get strong enough to beat her. And the classmates are all trying to get strong enough to beat the big bad and dealing with her. And as we're going through the series, you see that the goddess is definitely not all light. Like, there's definitely something else going on with her. Something a little darker. So it's been very interesting so far.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. And is that the same place?
Yeah, that one's also on Crunchyroll.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And the title intrigued me as well. As soon as I heard the title, I was like, yeah, I've got to
Failure Frame.
about that.
It's got a tagline. Let me see if I can find it real quick. Hold on. Failure Frame. I became the strongest and annihilated everything with low-level spells.
Nice.
It's so funny, like how so many animes are coming out and have super long titles. It's like, what?
I forget which one started it, but ever since it was like, yep, we're all jumping on the bandwagon now.
Yep.
Okay, cool. Okay, so my next show is on Netflix. It's a Swedish show and it's called Snabba Cash. So because there's 2 seasons. So the first season was a rewatch because I'd previously watched it when it came out a few years ago. But last year there was a second series. So set in Sweden, but it's sort of set in like a migrant community in Sweden. So like the slums almost. And the setup is then the main character is a single parent who she works in a tech company and she's trying to get like a partnership in this really like advanced kind of like AI type software. So at the same time she balances that out by working at like a restaurant, but it's sort of her balancing her sort of single parent life because her former like husband, he was killed tragically because he was involved in like gang stuff with drugs and he was killed in that way. And there's a tie still because his brother, so the uncle of her child, is still in that lifestyle, is still in like runs that gang. So she's kind of trying to keep her son away from him, and she's trying to kind of make ends meet, but also pushing herself to get this big break. And it all gets tangled up in the drug money because at some point she needs to ask her brother-in-law, for like money, and that's drug money. And the whole thing kind of escalates from there. So it follows various characters. She's obviously the main character, but you also follow the stuff going on with the gangs. You also follow a young kid on the street who kind of gets forced into that sort of way of life. And I think that's what the show is doing. I think it's showing these different characters and how they're all impacted, how by trying to make ends meet, they're trying to balance things, and as a result they get sort of forced into this way of life, and some of the consequences of kind of the way the structure is with it really gets into migrant culture, I think, quite well. Like it really shows you like the traditions of like these African type families a little bit. And I know it's been accused a little bit of like glamorizing kind of street life and like drug culture and things like that. And I guess my answer to that is I can't really say whether it does or not because I'm not really familiar with like slum life in Sweden. So I guess I can only say whether I like the TV show as a story, and I do. I think it's really gripping. It's got really complex characters, like that lead character, the mother, is really complex because she does start to get more and more power, but with more power she sort of becomes more ruthless, but there's also compromises. She's put in greater danger. And it's kind of that thing of like, the more power you get sometimes, or the more you get into this, there's less of a way out of it, you know, if things turn quite dicey, which they do in this. So it's almost a drama, but also a high stakes type thriller where things really ramp up. But I do like that. Then the characters are quite complex. So, I mean, in season 2, like her character, they pick up a year later, and they do that thing of they change her a little bit because it's a year on and she's got more power now, but like it still feels like the same character. So they've sort of got that balance right. So, as I said, I can't comment on if it's like glamorizing things. There's quite a lot of action. There's quite a lot of gang type stuff. And I think in season 1, especially, that stuff can grate a little bit at times. But I think it's a really strong series. I think like the drama of it and the characters are really compelling to watch. And when it's building up to like the big sort of tense cliffhangers or moments like that, I think that stuff is really tense. I think I might like season 2 a little bit more just because I think they build on the characters really well. My only sort of pet peeve with season 2 is they sort of do that thing sometimes that they do where a character who's been killed in series 1 will then appear to like the main character and almost becomes like a moral type compass, that actor in season 2 maybe. So there's that, but it's, to be fair, he's only in a few scenes in season 2, and he does sort of play his part, so I think that's fine. So I really like it. Basically, I'm not sure if there's going to be a season 3 or not. It ends with one of those sorts of endings where it could definitely be an ending, but if not, there is a little bit more you could do with a season 3, but I would be satisfied if this was the ending. So that's Snabbercash, which is on Netflix, both seasons. And Jess, you can drop off now if you like, because I know you're all done.
Favorite would be the Dahlia in Bloom.
Okay, nice.
With Failure Frame being a close second.
Okay. Good stuff. Okay. Well, you're free to go. And
Well,
me and
thanks
Alyssa
for
will
having
round
me.
up. That's
I'm
great.
sorry, got some family issues going on apparently in the next room, so
Always
gotta
the way. Okay. Thank you,
Yeah,
Jess.
but thanks for having me. Bye.
Have a good one. Bye.
I've been catching up on the new Futurama episodes,
Okay.
which is always a fun show. So yeah, it's, I will say, since they've been on Hulu, it seems like they've kind of like revived in like the energy. It doesn't feel as tired as it was starting to feel like. And they do a lot of Hulu gags now, which makes it fun. So but yeah, I've been enjoying Futurama.
Okay, cool. Yeah, because I know the original run did go on for quite a while, so maybe they needed that little bit of a refresh.
Yeah.
Okay. So I've also been watching, which I've only watched 2 episodes on, so I don't have too much to say, but I've also been watching a French show called Call My Agent on Netflix. And this is like sort of a fast-paced sort of satire in a way. So it's set at like this production agency in France, in Paris, and there's a little bit of a meta thing because they use quite a few like real actors and things. So like there's a real life actress, Cécile Delfrance, who they're dealing with in the first episode. And like the whole thing in the first episode is that she's up for a role in like a Tarantino movie, but it's like the agency find out that he doesn't want her because she's deemed to be too old for the role. And like they're just too scared to tell her to her face. So you get all these misunderstandings, and like one guy in particular who like outright lies to her because he doesn't want to tell her. And it just leads to all sorts of drama and hijinks. And at the same time, you've got this younger girl who has a connection to one of the bosses, one of the big wigs at the company. I'm not sure if they're meant to have had a thing or if like she just, but there's some sort of link which is going to be revealed later on down the line, I guess. But she's new, and because someone gets fired around the time she's there for the day, she takes the opportunity and becomes, you know, like a new assistant at the place. And I think it's one of those things, like you're not quite sure if she's like more manipulated than she comes across, like she's taking advantage of it and actually playing people off against each other, or if she is as vulnerable and naive and as she comes across, and she just happened to fall into that. And I think that's part of the hijinks and like the comedy and the drama of it. But so far it's pretty good. I'm quite enjoying it. Like I said, it's only 2 episodes I've seen. I know there's 4 seasons, but it does seem like quite an easy binge watch. Like it seems like it's quite a light sort of show that you would quite enjoy. So yeah, Call My Agent, not bad so far. Quite enjoying that. Do you have any more?
The last one I have
Okay.
might be, I guess, I don't know if I'd call it a guilty pleasure necessarily. It's just more of when I just want to laugh, and that's King of the Hill.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. So it's like, well, especially growing up in the south of Texas, which the show is actually based off of, like the apparently the original creator of the show actually like grew up in South Texas and was kind of just creating a show that represented the types of people that he met and stuff like that. And so it's like, on the one hand, there are a lot of very, very shitty people in the show, but it's not really glamorizing them or saying, oh, yeah, these are characters that you should be like or anything like that. It's just like, these are the part of the people that are inside this world. And a lot of them are, especially depending on where you grew up in Texas, you're just like, yep, I've met that stereotype before and stuff like that. But no, it's definitely not a show for everyone. I remember whenever I was younger and really into South Park, I had tried to give King of the Hill and Beavis and Butthead a watch. And Beavis and Butthead and King of the Hill were not my cup of tea.
Okay.
And I will say I'm still not a huge fan of Beavis and Butthead now. But
See,
King
I
of the
grew
Hill,
up on that stuff, so it's... I mean, I prefer Daria, to be fair. I got more into that.
fair. I mean,
Beavis and Butthead,
Daria's
I
a
do
good
enjoy
one.
it.
Yeah. But I will say, like, as an adult, like watching King of the Hill and having met enough of those types of people, I'm like, okay,
It's pretty relatable.
Yeah. So,
and I think, isn't it a spin-off of Beavis and Butthead? Because I think the main character was in Beavis and Butthead. I think so.
like, I know they're kind of like sister shows in a lot of ways, but I don't think Hank is technically their neighbor, but it is the same guy, like voice actor.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fair. All right. Well, I've got two more left, really. The first one is a bit of a nostalgia watch, which is just easy for me to pop on every now and again, and it is Dawson's Creek, which is one of my guilty pleasures because I grew up on it. And I seem to be watching it quite a bit recently, dipping in and out. I'm on season 2. And I'm following it along with a podcast called Again With This Podcast, which I can recommend. Very funny, entertaining podcast where the 3 main shows they cover are Dawson's Creek, 90210, the original show, and also Melrose Place. So very, classic soapy 90s show. But I recommend that podcast. So I've been watching it along. And it's a comfort blanket of a show, Dawson's Creek. It's as I said, I grew up with it. Season 2 I think is better than season 1. I know it's when they introduced Jack and Andy, and I think they're good characters, good additions to the group. I know the Jack Gay storyline, I think for the time was really ahead of its time, and I know looking back now you can pick holes in it, but I think for the time they handled it quite well. I mean, it's the same in some ways with the main character. Dawson remained as annoying as ever, such a much more of a Pacey fan than I am a Dawson's fan. And Mitch's father, Dawson's father, is one of the worst TV dads ever. Like, Mitch is just the worst. But Jen, the Michelle Williams character, I like as well. Although season 2 maybe isn't her best season, but I do like Michelle Williams. And as I said, it's a comfort blanket of a show. Very, for the time, quite progressive, but also just a fun, cheesy one to put on anytime. And the only other one which I've started watching, which I've only watched the first episode, so I can't say too much, but is a British show called Douglas is Counselled, which is on ITV over here. So you can find it on ITVX now. There's 4 episodes. And it's just like this comedy drama. It's from Stephen Moffat, who did like Doctor Who, but it's the setup is then you have like this popular news guy who makes like an off-color joke at like a wedding, and it gets picked up upon, like he's accused of sexism, and it ends up all over social media.
Oh, no.
And it's partly how they handle that situation, and it's implied it's not really the first time he's done it. And the idea also is then because Karen Gillan is also in it, and she plays like the co-anchor on the news show. And I think it gets into this. I don't know if it's the same in America, but in the UK, there's a long-running edition, or tradition, I should say, of like, you kind of have presenters where you get a much younger female presenter and like an older sort of man. And they're almost think of as like a couple, even though they're not like couple in reality, but they're almost treated like that on air. They're sort of referred to in that way. So it kind of gets into that. It gets into the sexism. It also gets into like the online thing, because when she finds out initially, she retweets it. And I think the idea is then she's maybe doing it as a way like to support him, but it's that idea of it doesn't matter the context of it, because like one of the gags is then when he realizes, oh, she's got 2.5 million followers, and he's like, I've only got 1.5, how come? And it's like, and the boss is like, is that really the important thing right now? But it's just this idea, because it's been retweeted to so many people, like you're suddenly in like you're playing, you're on defense sort of thing. So it's a satire about all that sort of thing. Like it really gets the social media stuff down really well, and the whole culture around that. It also gets, because he's got like a family and a young daughter who's at university, so kind of her reactions to it as well, and how she feels about it. So it's well done, it's well cast, and it's very funny. Like I've only seen episode 1, so it'll be interesting to see what sort of places they go with it. And one of the choices they make in episode 1 is that they don't actually like reveal what the comment was, what the gag was, and it's like this idea that he doesn't even remember what he actually said. But there's some really smart lines, some entertaining gags in it, and as I said, pretty well cast. So it's a promising one. It looks like it could be one of those little gems, maybe. So that's Douglas is Cancelled on ITV or ITVX, if you want to catch up with it.
Also this month, I caught up with the 4-part Amazon documentary series RoboDoc, the creation of RoboCop. So this is an in-depth documentary series looking at the making of and stories of the original 1980s groundbreaking movie. So probably a must for fans. It has in-depth interviews with all the main players. So Paul Verhoeven, you've got Peter Weller, Nancy Allen, Kurtwood Smith, Ray Wise, and a bunch of others, including the main writers and producers on the project. So it really goes in depth, scene to scene. The chaotic production, how at times there was like heat between some of the main stars and people behind it. Verhoeven and Peter Weller didn't get on, how at one point they had to shut down production and it was really in doubt. How they had their own sort of set to on the set. They had to call in one of the main producers to clear up heat. Background to why Verhoeven didn't want to do the movie at one point. It became his biggest US hit at the time and led to like other big US roles for him, but how at times, because of his background directing films in his native Dutch and how those films took on very different feels. Like sure, RoboCop was the film for him. It took his wife at the time to convince him how she read the script and said there's something in this. I also like the story about how one of the writers or producers gave him like American style comic books, like Judge Dredd style comic books, and that really convinced him and turned his head. I think the documentary is a lot of fun. There's some great stories in there, and it's good to get that in-depth sort of feel. At times it feels like it's a little bit like fan wankery, just because you get a lot of like actors recreating scenes and doing lines, and that stuff is a little bit over the top. The stuff about the political climate and why RoboCop was such a strong satire for the time, that stuff is well handled, and there's good sort of like cast stories, there's good production stories. Forget the Robo Oreo like story, where first of all it's kind of like insane that Peter Weller went full-blown method actor and insisted upon he was either called Murphy or Robo on set, but then you have the Robo Oreo sort of like story, which Matt Weller denies. He says he loves the guy who told the story, but it never happened. But this writer tells this vivid story about how he wouldn't do the scene without an Oreo, so he's up there on like this stage and he's teases him with the Oreos, and he's eating the Oreos in front of him to piss him off, and like, but it's this thing where he literally won't do the scene without an Oreo, and that becomes like a running gag, and I just love stuff like that. So it's a worthwhile deep dive into the legacy of RoboCop, the making of, and you get some good talking heads, good archive footage. So RoboDoc, the creation of RoboCop, is available now on Amazon Prime.
My show of the month is going to be Snabbercash, which is on Netflix. I'll go with that. And I think you already said yours.
Yeah, so but I realized I didn't say where you could watch it. So as I said before, it's Code Geass Rosé of the Recapture, which is it's on Disney Plus and Hulu. I also read somewhere in Europe, I think they mentioned like Star or Stars maybe, okay, but it's owned by Disney, places. So wherever like Disney will stream shows.
Okay, cool. Okay, well, I think we'll round up there then. Thank you very much to the now departed Jess, and also...
Oh, no, that sounds...
I know, that was a bad choice of words. I was
Jess is okay.
She's in the other room with the kids.
Yeah.
Sorting them out. But thank you very much. And do check out Horror Movie Tea podcast online. I'll link all your details in the description. And yeah, always fun. So
yeah, thanks for having us as always.
Yeah, and guys, let us know what you think of our choices in the comments if you've seen any of them, and we encourage you to say what you've been watching also in the comments. But thanks, guys, and we'll see you again soon. Goodbye.